Hey everybody, it's Deborah. It's Heal, Thrive, Grow Time on Thursday, and I'm so excited. I have a very special guest with me today. So I have Mindy Malone, one of my grad students, and Mindy, I'll give you a little bit of her background. She graduated from Michigan State, and then she moved to LA where she dipped her feet and worked in the film industry a little bit. And then she moved back to the Midwest, back to Chicago, where she had a career first in communications and then in real estate. And then got married, had 3 children, and then woke up one day with cancer at, oh my goodness, only 41. So welcome, Mindy. I'm so excited for you to share your story with all of our friends here on Facebook.
Well, thank you so much for having me. So about 4.5, almost 5 years ago now, I was diagnosed with advanced stage breast cancer. And it was terrifying. I had, I was only 41 and I had 3 little girls at home, and the thought of having to leave their lives was torture. And so I chose the most aggressive treatment plan, which involved a double mastectomy, months of chemo and radiation, and it was guns a-blazing. I remember one of the chemo drugs was appropriately referred to as the Red Devil, and the other was made out of a tree called the graveyard tree that historically had killed anything and everyone who had ever come in contact with its berry, and they would literally find piles of bones around this tree. And I just think it's interesting now that it actually saves lives. But so the treatment was hell. I was doing dose-dense chemo, which means I went in every 2 weeks. So just as my body would start to recover, bam, it would knock me down again. And, it was a pretty ferocious beating. It leveled my mind, my body, and ego. And that, along with the fact that I couldn't find any answers, control, or guarantees outside of myself, left me really with no choice but to turn within. It was back up against the wall, staring death in the face, and that really was the only place I could find any comfort or relief. And I started spending hours a day in this internal space and in what I now can identify as meditation. And soon I found myself communing with my higher self and really surrendering to the divine. And then one not so ordinary afternoon, Jesus himself, actually filled with the Christ light, came shining into my 3rd-story master bedroom window and to remind me of who I had forgotten I was. And he informed me that my cells had simply forgotten that they were a part of my body in the same way that I had forgotten I was a part of him, source, all of creation, whatever you want to call it. And it was in that moment that I knew I could recover if I allowed myself to. And it was in that moment, really, that was the first day of the rest of my new life. And it was in that moment that I was set on this healing path that led me to you. And I just want to thank you so much. You've helped me so much over the past 4 years. And I just wanted you to know how grateful I am.
Well, thank you.
So,
want to tell us more? Because this is quite a story.
Sure. I think that, the universe is always looking out for us. Like it never, it's always working for us, never against us. So, it looked at first like, breast cancer was going to be a huge curse. And it was terrifying. But in the end, it turned out to be this enormous blessing. And I wouldn't change a thing. It was worth it. I think that for me, I needed to, this was the fastest way for me to learn what I needed to know. And I know no one wants to suffer, and I don't think we have to. I think please use my wake-up call. But I also think that when you change your perspective and you look at any challenge that might come your way as potentially bringing you many more benefits than drawbacks, it changes everything, really. If you allow it, if you allow, the lessons to come through.
Yeah, no, you just speak so capably on this, and that's why I wanted to give you a chance to tell everyone on Facebook your experience. I found a lot of crossovers between your story and my own, so I was really quite taken with it. But I noticed that so was everyone else in the room when they heard you tell your story a few months ago at a live event. It wasn't just me. So, you have quite an ability to take your thoughts, Mindy, and express them and convey them in a way that's really helpful to other people. But I had some similar experiences to you, and I've discovered with working with thousands of people that it's surprising how many people, when they're in a really super stressful situation, have a figure from their religious background or some other philosophical background. Perhaps for each person it's different who it is, but like you, for me, it was the Christ figure that would come to me really vividly. Wow, I mean, you just knew it was so real.
Yeah,
so it was realer than anything else that was going on. Yeah, no, it's incredible when it happens, and of course it's a huge gift. It's you never forget it, do you?
No, and I living through it, I know beyond a doubt that we are witnessed and we are supported. And some people, cancer does take some people to the other side. They become non-physical. That doesn't mean they failed, but the fact that I survived,
it means it's their time,
right?
Different than your time or my time, right?
Right.
Our time, and we, the interesting thing is, it's so hard to believe this, but we really select our time of passage. We do.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there were so many things about the hallmarks of your story that I resonated with. I remember saying 30, 40 years ago to a live audience that cancer is nothing other than something, the part of us that's forgotten who it is. Yeah. Very similar to what you just said. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I heard Deepak Chopra say it one day, and I'm like, oh my God, we're all on the same wavelength here. He hadn't heard me say it. I hadn't heard him say it. Oh. So yeah.
Right. Well,
that's what it is. That's totally what it is.
Yeah. And a lot of your story resonates with me too. I mean, I was completely guided to you, and, I had that experience, and then I had heard you say at some point, very similar, scenario about the cells, and, it just, one thing after another, it just, really resonated. And yeah, it's just been an amazing 4 years. So much has happened. And I would, I would like to say that that day also, a death very much occurred, but it was the death of what I was not, because what we truly are is infinite. And
it was the death of your old self.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And, boy, I like to control things, and, it's interesting, the humility that, breast cancer really put me through, like losing all of my hair and my weight, and becoming almost unrecognizable to myself. It was amazing. I remember standing, looking in the mirror, and I could barely recognize. But then I realized that what was still standing there was actually more beautiful and everlasting.
The real kernel of you.
Yes.
Yeah, and it seems like when I think back, every big spiritual opening I've ever had, I was as flat on the ground as you can get. Just demolished.
Yeah.
You know? Ready to just like, how can this be happening again? Because I've just had so many things. I think perhaps more than the average person. I've had so many what other people would perceive as negative experiences. But like you, I always know they're going to bring me to the next level. So while I'm reeling and on the way to the hospital in the ambulance or whatever, I'm saying, thank you, Spirit. We're going up again.
But that takes a lot of trust, you know? So, yeah, but, you know, I don't think I could have read about it. I needed to experience it. And I think that's why I'm still here, is so I can.
And in fact, you know what? Just a few weeks ago, I read a New York Times bestseller memoir. I'm not even going to share the title of it, even if I could think of it, because it was right after I heard you speak. And I remember reading it. And it was about a young woman that had cancer and her whole experience with it. And it was so disappointing after I heard you speak. I thought, I got to call Mindy and tell her to write a New York Times bestselling book, because her story is so much better conveyed. Similar facts, but frankly conveyed from a higher point of view. Okay. Higher point of view. And that's the point of view we want to be sharing with all of those who come to hear us today, is we want to give them the highest version of ourselves that we can, the very highest version.
Right. And I really think that, you know, it's time for us all to wake up and recognize the divinity in each and every one of us. Yeah. And, you know, I feel like,
well, like you said, you're a part of the Christ light. His light is a part of you. And that's true for everyone here. And for someone else, of course, again, this is going back to the thousands of people that I've worked with. For somebody else, it might be an angelic presence or another guide. You know, it could be an animal totem. It could be, you know, a South American shaman from, you know, thousands of years ago. It couldn't be anyone guiding you. And for you, it's the Christ light, because that's probably what you know from your childhood. I would guess.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
And me too, despite all of the 20 years I spent immersed in Hindu teachings and philosophy, and I teach a Hindu meditation, and I teach a Hindu preventative healthcare system, Ayurveda. You know, I got a lot of Hindu going on here. The guides that come are always from the Christian tradition, because that's what I learned as a child. That's where my seventh chakra connects. It connects to those images of, sometimes it's the Divine Mother, sometimes it's an archangel, and lots of times it's the Christ light. That's my favorite. That's my all-time favorite.
Right.
Speaking of which, the day I met you, can I tell that story?
Yes.
Yes, I still remember. So it was the first time I think I ever taught a class by live stream, because I was too ill to fly to Miraval. And I thought, oh, I can make it. I'd only been sick a few weeks. I had pneumonia. I didn't know it. And I thought, well, I said to my husband, we'll just stop at the doctor's office on the way and I'll get a shot. You know, I'll be fine. And I get there and the doctor goes, you know what? You're going to the hospital. And he said to my husband, you go to Miraval. And so Eric did, to support all of you who were there. And when he got there, someone at Miraval, this was back in, I think, 2013 or 14, the Miraval people said, well, we'll just stream her in. I still remember, because it was a fairly new medium to me, and I was still pretty sick.
Yeah.
At the end of the first evening, Eric called me and he goes, my God, you look so sick. Can't you put some makeup on? And I said, I've got makeup on. So I remember that. You always remember being seen, right? Being seen, such an issue, isn't it, for all of us? Really, it's the biggest issue. And so there you were, a new student, and somewhere along the second day or something, I kept looking through the camera lens and I kept thinking, I swear to God, that's Michael the Archangel I'm sensing, because I'm more of a sensor than a seer. I'm not particularly into that, because I don't trust usually what I see, but I could hear the wings and I could sense his presence. And I thought, is he here for me, or is he here for that tall lady? I don't know. And finally I watched him, and he was standing next to you, and it merged. And then I realized that I was part of the merge. And this was very cool. It was like the three of us. It was actually a fairly heightened alternative kind of, I was in an altered state, I'm sure. And I don't know if I said anything at the time, but I remember thinking, this is wild. And then I heard a voice that spoke to me about something about myself. And it dawned on me later that I was so busy teaching that I forgot I was on camera, and that it had taken me out of that small self and allowed me to transcend it. Because even though I knew in my mind that you could see me on a screen in the room, I forgot because I couldn't really see myself. And I didn't see the camera, you know, the camera's a little tiny thing here. And so I finally was able to transcend that whole, oh, I'm being watched thing. So you brought me a great gift that day.
Well, I remember that's still one of my favorite workshops.
Yeah, me too.
Out of all the ones I've been to, is that that was special for me. Yeah, it was pretty priceless. Yeah, it really was.
Well, great having you here. Hey, I'd like to turn the topic over to torture. Sorry about having such grim topics today, but I was really struck over the weekend and late last Friday. I was very disturbed by the fact that we were all so excited. Oh my God, a woman nominee for the CIA, you know, and everybody's celebrating. And then I started to research a little bit, and I'm like, oh my God, she might have quite a bit of cultural baggage here. Might, because it isn't yet known, because the records are sealed. How handy is that? So at this point, we Americans are unable to look into her history and know whether or not she participated in some very grim tortures that were done incorrectly during the Bush era. This would be after 9/11, when everybody was like, you know, in state of total fear. And of course, that's not the right way to react, but that's how our politicians reacted. And let's torture people in off-site, secret, dark places. And so, of course, my concern, and I want to bring a lot of attention to this right now, is that we properly investigate any appointee, any nominee for an important office like, my goodness, head of our Central Intelligence Agency, and make sure that we're choosing someone who doesn't lean that direction, who doesn't have a lot of history with that, because it's always done, what's that word? Clandestinely, you know, secretly. Any thoughts on that, Mindy?
Well, yeah, actually, you know, until we wake up and realize that what we do to others, we're actually doing to ourselves.
Yeah.
This type of misguided practice is going to go on. I know. And
you know, I get just as wound up about any talk of the death penalty. It's the same thing. When we kill people, we're just inviting more of that behavior from everyone in our society.
Right. And
we're degrading life. We're devaluing it. It's all wrong. It's not higher consciousness. It's as low as you can get.
Right. And so much of what we've been taught by society is backwards and
primitive.
You know, yes.
I mean, if you go back and you look in the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Quran, I'm missing one of the important. Which one am I skipping here?
Did you say the Torah? Did you say the Torah?
Right. They are all opposed to torture. And we're all taught that, you know, most people have some kind of cultural upbringing where they've learned that this isn't the right thing to do. And yet our political bodies seem to skirt around what the majority of Americans feel. It's forbidden by the Geneva Convention. It's against the law in the US, you know, period. And every cultured society in the world has ruled against it. So it's you know, you're only finding it in a few really primitive places, except for here.
Right. And it just feels like, you know, we're so stuck still in like first chakra mentality of survival and kill versus be killed.
Right.
And, you know, it's time to wake up.
Change the conversation.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. You know, it's the same back to breast cancer. It's just, you know, we need to change the way that we're talking about that too. There's just so much fear. We're sold like so much fear, you know, to, I think, keep, you know, control over the masses. It just, you know, if you give the individual as much power as we really are capable of receiving, it, you know, it takes the power away from the government, etc.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, who are making a lot of money and you know, selling us a bill of goods that disempowers us. So, well,
before we quit here, we have a few more minutes. Let's talk for just a moment about where you think the future is going here with. Because I'm just starting to write another piece right now. I'm always constantly writing something, and then I'll put it aside for a few days and work on something else. So I always have a couple pieces kind of perking. And I'm thinking pretty hard right now about where we could go if I could design a future for the Me Tooers, and we could see maybe 10 years down the road, what kind of a future would I design for the world? And I'm thinking about gender equality. One of the biggest items, of course, is equal pay. It's a shocking thing that women do not receive equal pay for the same work. I'm thinking about a world where we wouldn't, women and children and men would not be subject to sexual predation. They wouldn't be concerned about their safety in that regard. That, you know, it would be much more open conversation, as it's starting to be. You know, I've really been thinking about where could we take this, and one of the things I think we need to develop to get there. I think we need to develop a pathway for those who have been accused and pretty much found guilty in the court of public opinion for wrongful acts in the Me Too campaign. I think there has to be a road for redemption for them. And I wrote a piece a month or so ago about that and was kind of criticized pretty heavily for it. When I asked a few of you what your thoughts were, a lot of people told me, well, you were just too soon. It was right after all those poor young girls that were subject to abuse by the gymnast doctor. Remember that story? It was, what, a month or two ago. And, oh, too fresh, Deborah, too fresh. And I didn't particularly mean him, because he was really despicable. And so I said, well, you know, the path to forgiveness for him would be where he's in prison for the rest of his life, but he's a doctor. And so he's to expiate his crimes and to redeem himself, he's given an opportunity to practice medicine on the fellow prisoners. I thought that'd be a great idea. So what do you think here, Mindy? Think about people we know of that have been, their lives have been destroyed. How about, for example, C.K. Lewis? I don't know if you know who he is. He's a comedian.
Yep.
His life is destroyed. I chose him to kick around here because, not literally, but to discuss, because his act was one of the least heinous. He exposed himself. That's a power thing. That's terribly embarrassing to the woman working in his office. She doesn't even know what to do. You know, what in the world would you do? You don't want to lose your job. You don't know what to say. You kind of want to pretend that you didn't see it, that it didn't happen. But in fact, he got called on it, and now he's lost everything, right? His career is in shambles. I think there has to be a path for redemption. I really do. And of course, that's also my background. That's very Christian, right? Can you see a way that these people, most of whom are men, wouldn't you think the first requirement would be that they admit their crime and ask for forgiveness? So that would immediately rule out Weinstein. He hasn't admitted his, right? Who else would that rule out? How about the insincere apology? The one written by the publicist.
Well, didn't C.K. Lewis, I think that guy actually handled it pretty well. I remember reading something from him. Yeah, that wasn't him, right? That wasn't. Was that written by his publicist?
No, I think his was legitimate, but I didn't think Kevin Spacey's might not have been legitimate. His was too polished.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it requires admitting that
a crime.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Wrong. They have to own it.
Well, they don't want to, because their lawyer and their publicist saying, "Are you out of your mind? You're going to go to jail."
Well,
I don't really think anyone's going to come arrest C.K. Lewis for that. I don't think that's what's going to happen next. But Weinstein, absolutely, they'd love to run him up a flagpole and arrest him. And I think he deserves to go to prison, and soon.
Yeah, I mean,
but I still think there can be a path of redemption for every single person, no matter how horrible their crime is. If they are seeking forgiveness, if they're genuine. But this is not something that our society seems to be offering at this time. The Me Too'ers, and I'm one of them, of course. I had my story of sexual aggression. Nobody except me seems interested in talking about a path of forgiveness and redemption. I think it's terribly important, if we're going to take the high road of consciousness here, that we talk about that.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that, they need to admit that there's been a wrongdoing. But I don't want the victims, and I don't want, their lives necessarily destroyed if they actually are, haven't, committed a criminal act, as in raping someone. Then you need to be in jail, obviously.
But this isn't about the victim, is it? I mean, I don't see how this takes away from what the victim experienced, and I want them to be a survivor anyway. I don't want to be stuck in victimhood.
Right.
And I'm afraid when I see someone in victim a long time, and the one that comes to mind, I'm trying to think of her name. She was one of the most outspoken. I don't think it's Weinstein. It could be. She shaves her head. Who am I talking about?
I can't think of her name.
I worry about her because it's been 10, 20 years. And when I saw her on all of this, the news here a month or two ago, it's Rose McGowan. At the moment I saw her on the news, I thought, oh my God, she's cycling in her victimhood. You could see it.
Yes.
She was winding herself up to be madder and madder and more upset and more victimized and more. And that kind of hate kills you, unfortunately. I thought, Rose, you're hurting yourself. You need to move on. Maybe she can't forgive, but I would love for her to, because that's what I would urge her to do. I felt so strongly she was stuck in the negativity and just cycling it. And as I teach, you've had this class, Mindy, when you see someone, your client cycling like that, you know that they're just cycling down deeper into the mud. They are not helping themselves remove from that negative experience. They're wedding themselves to it. And I read her book. It was pretty depressing, by the way, and very much still stuck in her story. Whereas you've taken your story, I'll swing all the way back now to the beginning. You've taken a story that somebody else would be, oh, poor me, cancer, chemo, what a nightmare, young kids, blah, blah, blah. Somebody else will be mired in it, right? And not have risen above it. Yeah. So wonderful having you on. Love chatting with you. Very inspiring to hear you. And just a couple of last minute comments. I will next be at New Living Expo at the end of April. That's in the San Mateo Convention Center and up in the Bay Area of Northern California. Great place to catch me if you're looking for a couple hours of inspiring energy medicine. That'll be a really fun experience. I think it's a Saturday at noon deal toward the end of April. And I just think if there's anything else I wanted to tell everybody. I don't think so. So, all right, Mindy, really enjoyed it. Great being with all you guys on Facebook. And thanks to all of those who came to share the time with us. Everybody take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.